One of the great things about having a studio is the ability to light a photograph on a blank canvas, giving you full creative control over how your photo looks. But we don't all have access to a dedicated studio space, and we may not be able to afford to rent one every time we want to take a photo in this way. So you might think creating an image like this would be pretty much impossible in a space like this, but actually, that's exactly where the image was taken. So let's take a look at how we achieved it, and what other options we have to make studio photos pretty much anywhere. First, let's talk about collapsible backdrops. These can be purchased from a few different manufacturers in a few different colours. These backdrops collapse down to a manageable size, similar to a cheaper 5-in-1 reflector, which makes them easy to transport and set up. You can hang them, prop them up against a wall, or create any number of awkward balancing systems like we've done here. Now obviously, there's some limitations with the size and usability of these backdrops. You won't be taking any wide or full body portraits, but by using a longer lens, for example here we used an 85mm, we have both a flattering focal length for a headshot and we're able to frame out the edges of the backdrop easily. But if you want to go a little wider with your focal length, or if you've just caught the edges of the backdrop in shot, it's usually an easy fix. In Photoshop, for example, we can simply select the patch tool and patch these areas out, using sections of the backdrop that are close by. In my personal experience, I've used these collapsible backdrops in my video work for product shots and simple lighting demonstrations. And even if finding a space indoors proves to be difficult, the ease of use of these backdrops means you can even use them outdoors, weather permitting. So the collapsible backdrop is actually pretty versatile and very easy to use. But what if we want a full-length portrait? We're going to need something like a seamless paper backdrop, as these roll down to cover not just the background, but also the floor. And you can actually buy these in pretty manageable widths, with a much longer length. This length gives us options, depending on the size of the space we're working in. So, say we've got this lounge to shoot in. Once we shuffle a few things around, we've got about 2 meters by 1.5 meters to work with, and around another 1.5 meters to shoot from. This isn't a huge amount of space, but we wanted to test the limits of what we could achieve with a studio setup, so that you have a good idea of the limitations and how you can make it work for your own projects. To put together our backdrop, we've got 2 C-stands and a telescopic crossbar. Our backdrop has a width of just under 2 meters, which is about perfect for this space. We'll set up our C-stands, insert the crossbar inside of our backdrop roll, and attach it to the stands. All good so far, but take a look at the floor. We're working on carpet. If we roll our backdrop down, we're going to have major issues as soon as any weight is placed on the paper. To solve this, we've got 2 1 meter by 1 meter pieces of plywood to put on top of the carpet, providing a flat surface for our subject to stand on without damaging the paper. The flat surface also helps us to sandbag down the paper and help prevent movement of the wood. Now 2 pieces of wood aren't often going to line up perfectly, and this can cause lines and marks on your paper with usage. We can mitigate this by hinging our pieces of wood together. And using tape to cover the edges as an extra precaution while we use it. So now we've got our backdrop set up, and in this situation, we've got just about enough space for our camera. A quick test shot to frame up the image. And we're getting a nice composition at around 28mm. We're shooting in crop mode, so we'd be able to achieve this angle of view at about 50mm on full frame. Let's get some lighting set up. We'd like to go for something simple, yet dramatic, using continuous lighting. Now we don't really have the space for any large softboxes, so we'll go DIY and clip a large piece of bleached muslin material to the curtain behind our camera. By bouncing an LED panel into the material, we've created a large, soft base level of fill light in our image. At a low level, this allows for some legible detail on the clothes and skin, whilst providing enough exposure to our slightly lighter backdrop so that our subject and clothing can stand out and be separated from the background. Since we're going for a dramatic look, we'll introduce a hard light to our shot to create contrast and work as a key light on our subject. But as we're working in a tight space and our subject is quite close to the backdrop, we need to make sure our light is adequately controlled to prevent unwanted shadows and light spill. Setting up a lighting unit equipped with a projection or spotlight mount, we're able to change the size and shape of our hard light, meaning we have full control over where it goes and how it affects our image. In this case, we've created a slash of light across our subject's face and some of his body. With this level of control over our key, we're able to achieve a dramatic effect with hard light in a small space without any issues with spill. You can see in our final photo, by setting our key at a much higher power than our fill light, we've created a large contrast ratio between our hard key and soft fill light. And by exposing within our camera's dynamic range, we have detail in both our shadows and highlights. So with just a few preparations, and by being in control of our lighting and how we wanted our photo to look, we've managed to create a studio portrait that our audience likely wouldn't even consider as being shot in a small space like this lounge. We also used continuous lighting for this shoot. Now, along with continuous lighting being much easier to use for photography these days, as you're able to get a more affordable output, it can also make more sense logistically when you're shooting in tighter situations, like with these DIY studio shoots. We definitely wouldn't have been able to fit a large softbox or octabox in this space, so we hung a large piece of bleached muslin material on a couple of boom arms and bounced 2 LED panels from the material, along with a third LED panel bounced from the ceiling to create a large, soft yet directional wrapping source of light that fits into our spatial limitations. This isn't to say to dump your strobes or flash guns, but to choose the best tools for the job, depending on the situation and what you have access to. You can see that by using a large, soft source, pretty close to our subject, we've managed to create a moody portrait with soft, wrapping light, with a nice fall off into shadow, all in a very limited space. Hopefully, this video has been some help to anyone who is looking to create studio-based work without owning a studio, and that much of an image is actually about how you use the space and the tools that you have, along with an understanding of how light can be utilised to create the image you want, even in slightly tougher circumstances, without a large studio to work in.